Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Once again, we want to focus on the ongoing drought and what it means for our state. Of course, crops are always a concern, but today we want to start with forage conditions. Here's SUNUP's Austin Moore.
Drive across the state right now and you see a wide array of bad-looking pasture. Here to talk about that and a bit more, Extension, Pasture, and Forage Management Specialist Darren Redfern. Darren, where do we stand right now as you look across the state?
You know, I think if we go back to the late winter of 2010, spring of 2011, I think the conditions, at least to me, look very similar to that point in time. And if you kind of think that was really where a lot of these drought conditions had started back that fall. Right now, you know, with the exceptions of some small areas of Oklahoma, a lot of the subsoil moisture is absent or it's pretty low, and that doesn't really bode well for a lot of forage production to occur this summer.
All right, so let's talk about individuals. You go out in your pasture, you're taking a look at it. What are the things you need to be keeping an eye on to really see how your plant community is standing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think as we look at some drought management and maybe try to think of a plan or come up with a plan other than just throw our hands up, one of the things that's very critical is looking at maintaining these perennial pasture plants. The second one, which hopefully a lot of producers have done, and we've been in kind of this mode for the past couple of years, is reducing those herd size. And then the third one is some kind of grazing management, okay? And so all of these boil together. The goal of the entire situation of those three key points is maintaining this pasture base or these perennial plants. And a lot of our perennial plants, whether they're warm seasons or cool seasons, they have mechanisms to deal with regrowth following drought. Okay, when they're short, they're going to try to come back every year. One of the things that's kind of an overriding factor of this is when we throw the grazing aspect on them. They can handle the drought, or they can handle the overgrazing, but they can't really handle overgrazing and drought together. So one of the things that I think is very important for this year is we look at maintaining a what I would call a critical stubble height on a lot of these pastures. And as you can see, you know, right now a lot of the pastures don't really have that stubble height there. I will bring up that grazing when these grasses are dormant is not going to have an impact. What we're talking about is grazing them when they're actively growing. Okay, so just from a grazing management standpoint, one of the things that's relatively easy to evaluate on these grasses is the stubble height. Okay, and so maintaining a critical stubble height, say on a lot of our introduced grasses, Bermuda grass, old world blue stem, those type of forages, somewhere around 3 to 4 inches would be ideal. Okay. If they happen to go down to 2 inches, that's probably not going to be that big an issue. Once they get below that is where we run into problems. Some of the natives, because they grow a little bit differently, the critical stubble height has got to be a little bit greater on those. Okay.
Can you give us a few just simple tips quickly on how to maintain that height if you've still got it?
Well, yeah, one of the easiest ways to do that is kind of where our herd reduction or reducing stocking rate and grazing management is going to come in, okay? To increase that critical stubble height, that's going to mean that the grasses are going to be able, or going to need to be able to have some kind of period of growth, okay? And so what we can do, the problem we ran into last year was they had begun spring green up so early. Forage was so lacking that a lot of those pastures last year were grazed well in advance of when they should be, and they never had a chance to accumulate that critical stubble height. So delaying grazing until they reach 4 to 5 to 6 inches would be ideal for beginning to maintain that critical stubble height.
All right, good information as always, Darren Redfern. And Darren will join us again next week to talk more about grazing management. On a related note, a special opportunity is coming to our state. The Society for Range Management will hold its 66th annual meeting in Oklahoma City beginning February 2nd.
So the Society for Range Management is an international organization. So there are members from Australia, Canada, US, Mexico.
With an expected attendance of 12 to 1,500, this is the first time the conference has been in Oklahoma since the 70s.
Part of the goal of the meeting is to provide some current, up-to-date experiences and research for producers and people on the ground managing rangelands. And so we have organized a special symposium or forum on Tuesday, February 5th, for producers. And so we're going to bring in several producers from the Great Plains. So we have producers from Oklahoma, from Kansas, mixed grass prairie, tall grass prairie, cross timbers, to really talk about their successes. And these are some of the well-known, award-winning rangeland managers. That's going to be in the morning session. And in the afternoon session, we're going to focus our attention to how to deal with rangelands and the energy industry.
The event will be held at the Cox Communications Center in Oklahoma City. Pre-registration has passed, but you will be able to register on-site the day of the meeting. For more information, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
It's been a pretty quiet week for the grain markets. Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist, joins us now. And Kim, slightly lower prices to mention?
Well, there's nothing feeding the market this week. We got the USDA report. We got about a 60-cent price increase in wheat. We got about a 55-cent price increase in corn. And then this week, with nothing to feed the bull, we got a 20-plus price decline in wheat, 20-plus cents, and 12 to 15 cents lower in wheat. What the market's watching now is weather, with either the hard red winter wheat crop or in Russia and some other areas. India, they're talking about India with maybe another record crop, their 7th record crop in a row coming online. But most of the emphasis is placed on weather in the United States and around the world.
And kind of just waiting it out. What are you kind of keeping an eye on down the road?
Well, the next report down the road is going to be in late February the 21st, 22nd. The USDA has their ag forum. I think that's what the market's watching now. It's watching that, and then of course they're listening to all the weather reports. Is it going to rain, or if it's not going to rain, what's the timing of the rain and how much are we going to get?
Of course, this time of year, producers are weighing their options, whether to graze out. What kind of calculations for wheat prices would you advise them on?
Well, if they're going to calculate whether or not to graze out their wheat, I think $7.75 is a pretty good price to use on that. If you look at the July futures contract and subtract about 55 cents off of that, you get about $7.85 is what the market's predicting right now. So I think a good price is $7.75.
Okay. Final word of advice as we wait on the weather?
Well, I think the producers, we need to watch that corn. If we get 99 million acres of corn planted, that price in July may be below $7.75. If they want to be very safe, use $7.25 on their analysis, and that'll for sure get the price for harvest.
Okay, good advice as always. Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Monitoring soil moisture with sensors is a tricky business. The measurements are localized, soil type impacts interpretation, and soil compaction plays a role. Even with the limitations, the data can be extremely valuable, and the values are definitely related to rainfall. Today we have 2 plant available water maps for you. The first is a map of plant available water from the surface down to 4 inches from January 7th. It shows a large area of dark brown dry soil in the north central part of the state. Freedom stands out at 0.05 of an inch, the same value for Blackwell to the east. Our second map shows plant available water from the surface down to 4 inches 7 days later, after a rain and snow have swept across Oklahoma. The soil water at Freedom rose to 0.82 of an inch, with Freedom recording 0.88 of an inch of precipitation. To the east, at Blackwell, the change in soil water only went to 0.19 of an inch, with the lower precipitation of 2600ths. The Panhandle numbers are missing from the January 14th map due to frozen soils. We're just beginning to learn about this new Mesonet soil moisture product. We hope you take the time to learn with us. Gary, is drought relief on the horizon?
Good morning, everybody. And as usual, wherever you're at watching this, I hope it's raining on you. And as usual, let's start out with the latest U.S. Drought Monitor report, see if we got any good news this week. Unfortunately, all I have this week is bad news. Now, I guess some good news is we didn't expand drought very much. We did have that improvement last week down in the southeast, but once we took a look at the statistics, we had to expand the D4 or exceptional drought up in the northeastern parts of the state. Other than that, no real changes in this week's map. We can take a look at the latest 3-month temperature and precipitation outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. First, for temperature, and this is for the February through April time period, we see increased odds of above normal temperatures across the entire state, a little bit higher odds down in the southwestern 2/3 of the state and the Panhandle. And then for precipitation, we see increased odds for below normal precipitation over that 3-month period over the western half of the state, including the Panhandle. Now, when the forecasters at the Climate Prediction Center took a look at those maps and they came up with this U.S. seasonal drought outlook, I'm afraid it ended up looking pretty nasty. In fact, for the entire state and much of the central part of the United States, in fact, we see odds of that drought either persisting or actually intensifying. And that's again for the current period through the end of April. So the odds look a little stacked against us right now, but of course spring is right around the corner and there's rain in the forecast over the next few days, so there's always hope. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We want to start off talking with Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist, about the Cargill plant closing in Texas, a pretty major beef processing plant. How did the industry react?
Well, it's always a shock when these things happen in terms of exactly when and where it's going to take place. And so the markets, the futures markets in particular, initially reacted pretty negatively. I think it'll be relatively short-lived in terms of the overall market impacts. This plant is a big plant. There's about 26 of these big plants among the 4 biggest packers in the U.S. So this one plant, and sizes vary a little bit, but this one plant probably represents roughly 3 to 4% of feedlot or fed steer and heifer slaughter capacity in the U.S. We knew we had excess capacity, so this helps bring capacity back into line with availability. I don't think it's going to necessarily make prices a lot lower because there will be plenty of demand in the remaining capacity for the number of animals that we expect to produce in feedlots this year. Now, you mentioned capacity. Did the industry experts sort of expect this to happen? There's been some pressure in terms of excess feedlot and packing capacity for many years, and certainly in the last few months, the last several months, we have talked about the likelihood that we would see on the packing side at least one of the major plants go offline. We could even see another one potentially go offline in the next 12 to 24 months. So it's not really a surprise. It's always a bit of a surprise in terms of who's actually going to make that decision and when and where it'll take place. But the fact that it did happen is not at all a surprise. Okay, so possibly more then? It's possible. We still probably have some excess capacity in the industry relative to cattle numbers for the next 2 to 4 years. Okay. The drought, of course, huge impact on the cattle industry. Let's talk about hay production and sort of what the latest crop estimates are and what the situation is there. USDA recently released their annual crop production summary, and that included, the hay production and the stocks number. USDA measures hay stocks twice a year, but the most recent one was on December 1st. And with a significantly lower 2012 hay production in the U.S. because of the drought, December 1, total hay stocks in the U.S. is at an extremely low level. It's the lowest total U.S. stock level for December 1 since 1957. So, 2 years of drought have critically reduced supplies. In Oklahoma, we've had low December 1 stocks the last 2 years. The 2012 number was actually fractionally higher than 2011, but both of those numbers were the lowest we've seen since 1984 in Oklahoma. So again,
what's becoming more and more apparent is that forage supplies are extremely tight around the country. And you know, you combine that with the fact that we ended last fall with the last pasture and range report showing that over half of the country had poor and very poor range conditions. With these limited hay stocks, it means that we're rapidly running out of resources in terms of being able to maintain cattle production.
Okay, and obviously it's going to get better or it's going to get worse. You kind of got to prepare for both.
That's right. I mean, you know, it's wintertime right now. The drought conditions, if they persist, then things will get worse. When we get to what should be spring and we don't have spring, then things will get worse, and it will be very critical very quickly for a lot of producers. If we get moisture and moderate these drought conditions, then things will improve. And we'll, you know, pick up from where we are and try to go back to rebuilding things a little bit and getting back on track.
Okay, and final word of advice for producers with all this in mind?
Well, again, you know, we're a long ways into this drought. Lots of folks have relatively limited flexibility yet, but I guess the main thing that I would remind producers is that ultimately surviving the drought is not a question of how many cows you manage to hang on to. It's really more important that you maintain enough equity in your business so that you have something to rebuild with when this is all over. So, you know, if that little person inside you is telling you you really need to get rid of some more animals, you need to go ahead and make that decision sooner rather than later before you completely drain all your resources.
Okay, good advice. Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to spend a little bit of time talking about set screws and the different types.
Okay, there are, right here we have 4 different types of set screws. One's a flat point, one's a cut point that's knurled, and we've got just a pointed one, and we've got a cut point with no knurl.
So you kind of need to think about where you're going to go, what you need out of a set screw as far as what you're going to look at for the design.
So if you're wanting to make sure that your pulley or sprocket, whatever it may be, you're fastening to your shaft stays on well, you're probably going to look at a pointed one, a cut point, or a knurl point, which the knurls actually help back it off. But if you're going to do something that you adjust regularly, you want to go with a flat point.
And so there's also some other types of set screws that might be beneficial if you have the right setup for those.
Okay, this is called a detent set screw, and it's got a plunger in it, and you can plunge that in. So if you want to rotate around and index something, why you can get these with springs inserted, and they've got a plunger ball that will go into the detent hole.
So just a little bit on set screws. Know what you want and what the application requires.
Thanks for watching. See you next time on Shop Stop.
We want to spend some time now looking at nutrition for livestock during these winter months. Joining us now is Dave Lallman, our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist. And Dave, a lot of producers in the middle of feeding hay right now. What kind of things should they keep in mind?
Well, we have, you know, somewhere between 90 and maybe 120 days before the lush green up that we're going to experience this spring. And so quite a ways to go yet. And I think, you know, one thing producers certainly need to monitor is the body condition of their cows. Hopefully they're still in moderate body condition now, in other words, not thin. And if we use a condition score scale of 1 to 9, that'd be about a 5 right in the middle. And that's where we like to hold them until spring green up. So try not to lose any ground.
Now, of course, there are some challenges in a drought year and not such great wheat crop, and that's obviously a concern as well.
Yeah, you know, wheat kind of bailed us out last year in cool season forages just because it was an inexpensive source of protein, and some people had to use it to replace, you know, lower quality forage too. So it was a nice thing to have, and we just don't have that opportunity this year. But you know, it's just going to be a matter of making sure that they do have adequate forage supply, whether it's purchased hay or standing forage, to get the inventory of cattle that they have through to the spring in that moderate body condition. And to do that, you know, if they're feeding hay, they need to know the nutrient concentration in the hay, the requirements of the animal, and then based on that information, match the forage quality with supplement that's appropriate for that situation.
Okay, so you got to do the pen and paper and figure all that out. Now, obviously, efficiency is really important, feeding efficiency, and you and your team out here at the North Range have studied that in several different ways. Kind of get us up to speed on the research underway right now.
Okay, well, sure. You know, one of the things that we have been working on the last couple of years is just trying to stretch that forage supply and like you mentioned, improve forage utilization efficiency, if you want to think of it that way. And according to the research that have been done, there's 3 ways that are rather practical that most people could do 1, maybe 2, and some maybe even implement all 3 things. And those 3 things are simply, number 1, use a better hay feeder that minimizes hay waste. We found differences of 21% hay waste with some feeders all the way down to 5% hay waste in other feeders. So just using a better hay feeder is one way to stretch the forage supply. Another thing is to feed an ionophore. The ionophore that's cleared for beef cows is called rumensin, and so it's just a feed additive that you can order from the feed company. Costs about 2 cents per cow per day to include, and it could cut back on the amount of hay that you need by about 10%. So it could be a substantial savings. And then the third thing that could be done is to limit animals' access to hay. Instead of letting them have 24/7 access to it, cut back to maybe even only 6 hours per day, should be able to reduce or stretch that forage by another, say, 10% or so.
Okay, so you have a study set up like that out here looking at all 3 of those factors, and you've got some early results in?
We do, yeah. We had one treatment, we call it, a group of pens that got what we call standard management. And Lyndall, that was simply 24/7 access to the hay, kind of a moderate quality hay feeder, and no rumensin or no feed additive. That was a standard group. Then the treatment group actually got all 3 of those things. They got, in our case, we use 7 hours a day access to the hay. You know, we just like the pen you see in the background here, we just put up some cattle panels. We'd open the gate at a certain time, then at 7 hours later, we'd push the cattle out and shut the gate again. So pretty simple process. And then the third thing we did was use a hay feeder. Here you see in the background a hay feeder with a modified cone and a solid sheet on the bottom, designed to minimize hay waste. And so that was the third treatment, was all 3 of those things together.
And you found it was good utilization?
It improved forage use efficiency. What happened was the cows that had restricted access, this treatment that you see here, consumed 18% less hay and weighed exactly the same as the other group at the end of an 84-day period. So 18% and no difference in weight gain. It actually was pretty exciting.
I see the dollar signs adding up already, which is always good news for producers.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, thanks for getting us up to speed on those 2 topics, and we'll see you again soon. Dave Lallman, our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist.
Every baby calf that's born has a condition that we call acidosis. And what that means is that during the birthing process, that calf had a buildup of carbon dioxide and some of its products, as well as being depleted in oxygen. And so when that baby calf is born, if everything goes right, you'll observe that it pants in an effort then to try to correct this situation we call acidosis. The degree of the acidosis is quite variable. In some cases, it may be very, very slight, and after a little bit of panting, the calf returns to normal breathing and is quite all right. In some cases, the acidosis is so severe that that calf may have some brain damage, or even some of the other organs may be damaged. So we need to understand this process. When we're working with cows and heifers at calving time, and especially if we have one that it's a difficult pull, it's taken a long time, and especially if it's a backwards calf, getting that calf started breathing as soon as it's born is very, very important.
One of the ways that I think we can really do a good job of helping that sluggish calf get started breathing is by just getting a real stiff straw and actually putting that straw in the nose of that calf, like you see on this demonstration. Tickling that nostril will cause that calf to snort, to cough, and begin to breathe and begin that panning process to correct the acidosis. One of the cautions I'd like to give you is to avoid the temptation to hang a calf over the top rail of a fence in thinking that we might be draining some of the extra fluids. Usually what we're draining is not coming out of the lungs, but out of the stomach instead. And if we pinch off the diaphragm muscle, that's the muscle that allows the calf to start breathing. If we pinch that off by the weight of the calf on that top rail, then we're actually being counterproductive to what we really want to take place. Try using that stiff straw in his nose and get him started breathing as soon as possible, and I think we'll save just a few more calves. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
That does it for us this week. Remember, you can see our stories anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.